ESPN came out with a really cool article going over the top 50 free agents in the NFL for this upcoming cycle, and a couple of guys jumped out to me as potential targets for the Falcons. So I want to run through those names with all of you today. Welcome on in to Falcons Today. Matthew Peterson here, running through a script and a show that one of the new guys here at Chat Sports, Trace Moustakas, put together. So if you like it, I'll take all the credit. If you don't like it, blame Moose in the comment section. But we have a very exciting period of time coming up for the Dirty Birds, but I would love to hear your opinion on this free agency period right from the start. Who is a player you would like to see the Falcons sign? Scroll on down and give me a name in the comment section. Now, let's turn our attention to the top 50 free agents, as I've identified 10 players that look like good targets and candidates for the Falcons to pursue in NFL free agency. They've got a okay amount of cap space right now, but that number is very fluid. They can always make some moves and move money around. The first player, though, that is on ESPN's free agent list of top guys that I think could make sense for Atlanta is DJ Reed, the Jets cornerback. He clocked in at number 4 on their list. Reed last year for the Jets did not have a spectacular season if you just go box score hunting. No interceptions, no forced fumbles, but came over from Seattle and immediately became a mainstay in that Jets secondary. Plus, he's got the familiarity with Jeff Ulbrich. So when you look at the Falcons cornerback room, there's got some really good pieces here, but ultimately, I think that we would love to see an addition made because A.J. Terrell is the only returning guy in a starting role at this moment. Mike Hughes, D. Alford, Kevin King, Antonio Hamilton are all slated to be free agents. I expect them to bring Hughes and or Alford back. I'm not 100% convinced they're going to bring both of them back, so it might be one or the other. Moving on here, the next free agent to watch for is Khalil Mack from the LA Chargers. He comes in at 7 on Matt Bowen's list of top 50 free agents. He also mentioned the Falcons by name when talking about Khalil Mack destinations. The 8-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year back with the Raiders, has been a mainstay amongst top edge rushers in football for the last couple of seasons. 5 seasons with 10 or more sacks, including a dominant 2023 campaign with 17 sacks and 5 forced fumbles. He is up there in the H column. He debated whether or not he wanted to retire, ultimately deciding to play one more year. And like I said, Matt Bowen listed the Falcons by name as a team that Mack could end up with. So keep an eye on him as we get closer to March. I would be very open in signing Khalil Mack. I'd be on board with it. You should not have the expectations of that this 33, 34-year-old is going to come in here and play first, second, or third down. But you give Mack a 1-year, $10 million contract, and he plays third down for you, and he comes away with 7, 8, 9 sacks. Yeah, I think you're getting your money's worth right there. Now, another player at that same position to keep an eye on is Josh Sweat, the Eagles edge rusher. He has a big game coming up. I don't know if you know about this, in a few days from now against the Kansas City Chiefs in New Orleans. So Sweat is one name to keep an eye on. And Moose, we can actually bundle Sweat with the next player on the list here. Coming in at number 17, it's a former teammate of Josh Sweat. It is Haason Reddick. And obviously, we all know Haason Reddick from when I may or may not thought he could be a Falcon. Now, these two guys, one's coming off a very good season. 8 sacks, 9 tackles for loss for the Eagles. Meanwhile, Reddick, I didn't bother to share his 2024 stats. Those stats on screen are actually from 2023, his last season with Philly. Reddick, if you don't know, skipped the first third of the season due to a contract negotiation or a contract dispute, if you will, with the Jets. So we rarely saw him, but he does have the connection to Jeff Ulbrich. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Does Jeff Ulbrich want to bring over Reddick, who sat out the first third of the season on his team, or his old team? Maybe, maybe not. Ultimately, only Ulbrich is going to know whether or not this is someone he wants to work with again. Now, what could it cost to land one of these two players? I cooked up these projections right here. These are just rough estimates for you guys. I could see Sweat getting a 3-year, $45 million contract. He's approaching 30 years old. That pays him an average of $15 million. That's probably a little bit on the low end. Maybe it's 3 years, $50 million. Meanwhile, I could see Reddick getting a 2-year, $25 million contract. Pays him around $12.5 million. That's probably on the high end if you just go off of his 2024 production. The 25th player for ESPN's top 50 free agents is cornerback Rasul Douglas from the Buffalo Bills. Was with the Packers not long ago, traded to Buffalo, and has been a very, very key piece of this Bills secondary that has got a couple of free agents coming up in that same department, and they might have to prioritize some other players over Douglas, who had 58 tackles, 5 pass breakups, no interceptions, but a forced fumble. Nevertheless, though, a very important part of that Bills secondary that helped them reach the AFC Championship game. Now, I bring up Douglas because Matt Bowen mentioned this when talking about him. Douglas is certainly open to staying in Buffalo, but the Bills, who have a penchant for paying in-house talent, could choose to prioritize young cornerback Christian Benford. Douglas will have a strong market among zone-heavy teams. That zone-heavy teams part really jumped out to me because I'm starting to think about who are some of those zone-heavy teams. I don't know. How about the Atlanta Falcons, who were 4th in zone defense this past season and 31st in man? So it's fun to look at some of the best players, but you got to kind of factor in the scheme. And the scheme might change a little bit for Ulbrich, but my guess is Raheem Morris is not going to let him go from a very zone-heavy defense to a very man-heavy defense in one offseason. And if we're looking for good fits, Douglas could be a very good fit for the Dirty Birds. Now, we have some more Falcons free agent targets to look at in just a moment, so do not go anywhere. But I do want to give a big special shout out to a friend of ours, and that is our great sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Plus, they do this awesome deal, which is Patrick Mahomes, his passing yards for the Super Bowl is 0.5. They're just giving you this one right here. So go out there and take it, Herb Brooks inspired, and pair it with 1 or 2 more, and you are ready to roll. Now, Prize Picks also puts their members first. So all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All of that information is in the comments and description of today's video. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Turning our attention back to some of the top free agents out there according to ESPN. After going through 5 guys in the top 25 that make sense for Atlanta, we can check out some other guys that make sense as well, including their very own Drew Dalman, the Falcons center. So, Dalman clocks in at 27, and this is a very, I wouldn't say tough or sore subject here. We'll talk about Malcolm Koonce later on. Sorry about that, everyone. One of the new guys on the 1s and 2s, so just bear with us here a little bit. But Dalman is a very popular name when it comes to free agency because he has been a very good center for the Atlanta Falcons, and I would love to see them find a way to bring him back. But we also have to acknowledge that he is going to have a decent market this upcoming free agent cycle. If I had to guess what Dalman could yield in free agency, it would probably be a 4-year, $64 million contract. That makes him a $16 million player a season, the second highest paid center, only trailing Creed Humphrey. I'm going off of what Lloyd Cushenberry, the Titan center, got in free agency last year, which was not as much as this, but he also is not nearly as good as Dalman. So I would love for Drew Dalman to come back. I'm sure the Falcons would love to bring him back. I'm not sure if they're going to have deep enough pockets to make him the second highest paid center in football. If his real price is not that high, then I could easily see him returning to Atlanta. But I also could see Terry Fontenot going, I used a 4th-round draft pick on Dalman. It's a pretty good offensive line class in this draft. I can probably find another Drew Dalman in round 3. Well, they don't have a third-round pick, but round 4, and not charge myself $16 million a season, but $1 million a season. And that could be the route the Falcons pursue. On to Malcolm Koonce now. Now we'll talk about the Raiders defensive end, who unfortunately missed all of 2024. He tore his ACL before the season even started, but Koonce, before tearing his ACL, put together some really good stuff in 2023. 8 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles. He is a rising name when it comes to under-the-radar free agent targets. I think he is your cheaper free agent option. Josh Sweat, Khalil Mack, Haason Reddick, they're going to cost you likely a little bit more. And if for one reason or another, the Falcons don't end up with one of those 3 guys, Koonce is not a bad fallback option because of what we saw from him in 2023. Unfortunately, no 2024, so his market's going to shrink a little bit, but I still like him as a target for Terry. On to 31 now. It is Asante Samuel, cornerback for the Chargers, former first-round draft pick. Samuel put together a really good start to his career. Unfortunately, he did miss a good chunk of time in 2024 with a shoulder injury, and the best ability is availability, so that's a tiny little bit of a concern for me, but ultimately, I look at the fit, and I think here's a ball hawk, a guy who plays bigger than his size would indicate, and has a lot of familiarity with the zone defense, which is what they ran mostly in LA with the Chargers. And like DJ Reed, I'm seeing the fit quite nicely. Another former Old Brick player is Jamien Sherwood, the linebacker for the Jets. He started pretty much every game this past season for New York, and Matt Bowen also recognized the fit right here with Jeff coming over to Atlanta. Bowen wrote, 3 different personnel evaluators brought up Sherwood to me unprompted when discussing the free agency class. Watch for Atlanta, which features a lot of former Jets staffing, or San Francisco, boo, where former Jets coach Robert Saleh now runs the defense. It may very well come down to the Falcons and the 49ers for Sherwood. He comes off a 158 tackle season, 10 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 3 pass breakups, and I'm sure Ulbrich, the linebackers coach for the Falcons not long ago and a former linebacker himself, would love to work with Sherwood again, but I'm not so sure if Fontenot or Morris feel the need to add a linebacker. This one is up for debate for sure. Caden Ellis, we know, is reliable, and he's a playmaker, and he's not going anywhere. Troy Anderson and Nate Landman both went back and forth with injuries in 2024, really decimating a lot of people's confidence in them. I'm still confident in the trio of Ellis, Anderson, and Landman. Now, Landman is an exclusive rights free agent. He's going to be re-signed. It'll be super cheap. The Falcons would be dumb to not bring it back for pennies on the dollar for what he's worth. But if the Falcons don't feel a lot of confidence in Anderson, then maybe they decide to bring in someone who Ulbrich recently worked with. The final free agent I want to talk about is Chase Young, the Saints defensive end who was a former top 2 draft pick in the 2020 NFL draft by the Washington football team at the time, right? I don't think he was a Redskin. No, it might have been a Redskin. I don't remember. Anywho, he was the rookie defensive player of the year back in 2020. Didn't really work out. And there's a lot of reasons why. The Commanders themselves are not very good. They were looking for a bit of a rebuild, so they traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young in the same 24-hour span. Young goes to the Niners, brings him all the way, or helps him get to the Super Bowl. I don't know how much of help he really provided, though, which brings me to some of the concerns, and that's effort and attitude. Tore his ACL year 2 in D.C. Misses a lot of the following season, and the word on the street was not a lot of effort in the rehab process to get back on the field as soon as possible. I don't know if those effort concerns still persist today. He played every single game for the Saints this past season. Did not start in any of those games, but that's all right. You got Cam Jordan there, so I'm not very concerned about that part. He played a good amount of snaps, nearly 70% of snaps, so he might as well have started for them in my eyes. But I think there's a chance for him to get a decently sized contract There were concerns about the neck injury as well after his time with San Francisco. Those concerns, I'd say, were put to bed by the availability he had for the New Orleans team every single game this past season. One of my friends texted me asking about the possibility of the Falcons signing what's his face, Chase Young, and my response was, I'm not sure if the locker room in Atlanta is right for Young, who would be stepping into what would be perceived as a bit of a leadership role, given that there's not a bunch of old guards in Atlanta at that defensive end spot that can help bring Young along in terms of maturity and leadership. People will be looking up to Young at that spot. And I'm not convinced that's a good position for the Falcons to put themselves in. Free agency, though, is not far away, so make sure your notifications are on when we start to get signings and rumors and trades and all that good stuff. I don't want you in the dark, so scroll on down, subscribe if you haven't already, but also click the notification bell. That way when news drops, you're not in the dark.